All right, so there's the column from the old Grand Mosque, Arabic passage from the Quran. Right there, Allah Akbar, and praise Jesus. Most people probably miss that. So there's all kinds of symbolism all mixed into one here. Things from the Roman era, like the armor, the eagle. Things from the Byzantine era, like that gold mosaic right there. Things from just Catholic design with the door and everything. The Arabic stuff. Up here is likely where the minaret was for the call to prayer. Up top there, but it was obviously added towards. And if you back up more, you get a grand scale of just the mix of amazing architecture. And actually, Muslim architects were the primary designers of this, because at the time of the Norman era, as most Northern Europeans and other Europeans weren't very mathematically attuned and good at engineering or architecture anymore. That's why they call it the Dark Ages. This was mostly built by local Muslim architects, engineers, and mathematicians and artisans for the Norman kings of the Kingdom of Sicily. Amazing. Okay, inside this 1100s built Norman church with incredible mosaics and Byzantine architecture mixed with Catholic. We have something interesting here. Pillar is an Arabic, is likely taken from a mosque that existed near here during the Emirate of Sicily times or after. In it, in Kufic, so the Kufic inscription, the oldest calligraphy form of the various Arabic scripts, reads, "In the name of God, in the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, Bismillah." All these prayers are the chapters of the Quran start with these words: "God is sufficient. God is sufficient for me, and He is the best advocate." Or "Allah is sufficient for me, and He is the best advocate." I think we can all agree with that. Anyway, this was here since the 1100s, part of a mosque before the Islamic Palermo times, and it's one of the things that exists. Beautiful, great, and just the ceiling of this church. Also the floor is in Islamic design. Up in the middle here, in the center.
Ein Teil Albaniens, also Karibes, Küste Albaniens und Griechenland.
So this is a real mix of Byzantine style. Very similar to how Eastern Orthodox artwork looks. This is very similar to how mosques are in North Africa. And of course, the altar looks very similar to Catholic churches all around the world. So it's a mix of all three of those in one building. Pretty cool, huh? 1100. You know, the Muslim world fascinates me just because it's so different and not really talked about. It's a shame. You know, Western education, the old Judeo-Christian bias of things, you know, just the age-old competitiveness of those two worlds, Christian versus Muslim worlds, that goes on to this day, the West, and, you know, I think that's messed up, how things are left out a lot of times for different reasons in academia and education. They don't teach you hardly anything about Islam in school. They don't teach you hardly anything about China because of, you know, communism. Ooh, scary, scary. They don't teach you nothing about Persia. And it's bad. All right, These pieces here were from old mosques built in this pillar. This is Arabic. Reading from the Quran. I believe it says, God, all merciful. Yeah, check the comments. It's really cool design. This beautiful church. Whoa. Ciao. Like the Islamic call to prayer, church bells serve a similar purpose. A little bit different, you know. That's more of a telling of the time, but there's more similarities and things than we think. Call to prayer, church bells, same kind of thing. Winds are going out here. Sites of ancient Islamic and Catholic history. Interlude in that end of classical history, from the Punic times to the end of the Western Empire and the end of the Byzantine times. So this area right here, oh, there's a bike race happening too. Cool, huh? Look, oh! All right, so this area right here was the center of the both Carthaginian, Phoenician, began to be built up in the 400s, 300s BC, all throughout the Roman era. It still was used into the 600s AD as its original way before the Islam kind of changed it over. Got some music, it's pretty cool. Got this later built statue with a lot of Roman and weird symbolism on it. These cool dragons. Oh, literally. Oh, there's another biker. Boom! Yeah, cool. So literally walking the footsteps right now of the ancients. 2,500 years ago or something crazy. It's crazy to think about. 1,500 years ago, this was the center of the city. During the Roman times, Panormus, it was likely where the forum was of the town. Lots of things been excavated. Look at this facade. Has some little bit of World War II damage. This is a nice song. This was made a little later. My Palermalita here. Bis non Palermo is from you. One of your great grandma could have been sitting in the same square someday. Great grandpa or something. Anyways, this was the center of the ancient town.
Famous restaurant.
We did some dancing. That's the guy who created Italy. Oh yeah, that is the name. Alright, anyways, this is the ancient center. Oh, some good music. Ancient center of all that history we were just talking about. All stretched down there where the cathedral was and that park, all that. Some other stuff. So this is something that the Roman Empire did. This isn't Roman, but when they made a triumph for their defeated takeovers of places like Thrace, Bulgaria or Egypt or England, Britain, all the several battles that invasions of the Roman Empire, they would build a triumph for themselves, and part of that was the armor with no bodies in it of the vanquished peoples that they conquered. So that's what's going on here. But this looks like it was, hey, another biker! Yeah! This looks like it was built 1700s, something like that. That dragon is crazy. But it invokes classical Greek and Roman architecture. Here's another biker. Maybe? It's cool bike races going on. Hope you're enjoying the Palermo history video. Yeah, let's say something about... Yeah! Cool. Something that says Germanico, Hispanico, Galicio, Mexicano. Oh, I see what's going on in here. So this is all... Palermo for a long time was part of the Spanish Empire. And these are several places that are part of that, like different places in Germany, Mexico, Peru. Wow, that's very interesting. So this was maybe the 15 or 1600s when this was built. Fascinating stuff. All right, we're here at the site of, some people think, a former mosque. Definitely it was Arabic in design, influence, and they know for sure it was a Islamic burial ground. So that's the next time we're getting into in history here. The 600s to 800s. Oops, sorry about that. All right, here we go. So 827 to 1250 AD was the time of Muslim Sicily. So inside here, this was built in the 1100s for Christian purposes, but it was built in North African Arab style. And they believe a mosque was here. A lot of people, like this room is called the Arab room. The domed ceilings, they have all the domes and the geometric designs of everything. Cool, ancient stuff. UNESCO. Ciao! Alright, so let's tell the story. The first raids from Muslims onto Sicily was from North Africa way back in the year 625, when the Prophet Muhammad was actually still alive. That was over in Siracusa, though, where this was happening. Palermo and the island would remain Byzantine into the 800s, Christian Byzantine Empire. Although there were dust-ups from time to time. Let's take this off. Nobody's around. There were dust-ups from time to time, especially with Arab pirates in the waters, or Saracens they were often called. So, you know, Byzantine Empire was kind of faltering a little bit. Couldn't really control their lands very well, and they were having a big problem with piracy here, Muslim raiders. So an organized North African group of people, which included Arabs and Berbers and different people called the Aghlabids, was also Bedouins and some different African peoples. They created their own caliphate that broke free from the main Islamic caliphate in Baghdad. So they launched a jihad against the Byzantines that ruled Sicily. A renegade group of local rebels, local Sicilian Christians, who were mad at the leadership in Constantinople, they sided with these Muslims from North Africa. And with some dubious circumstances, there was a broken treaty and there were some pirates dealings. I don't know. It was a confusing story. Let's clear this camera up a little bit. Alright, so it became eventually the autonomous Emirate of Sicily. Initially, it was planned to be a Muslim-only island where non-believers likely would have been banished or worse. But it was decided that the infidels were allowed to stay with freedom to worship was the law of the land in this new society. The city and island flourished during this time. It is said to compete with Cairo and Cordoba, which was the Muslim capital of Al-Andalus, Spain. Palermo competed with those two other cities as the height of society all around the world at the time. Places in China would argue with that probably, but other than that, you know, places like London, Paris, they were mud holes at this time when Palermo was one of the high society places of the world, man. Even Rome was doing kind of rough during this era, the Middle Ages. So it had some of the most beautiful and high culture cities of the world. A high number of, actually, in Muslim Palermo, a high number of Christians and Jews flocked to the island for work because the economy was flourishing so much from other areas. Plus, there was many already here too. The Muslim rulers, though, increased taxes, with many exceptions for Muslims, which, you know, is kind of rough. But the local population was already mad at the Byzantines for increasing taxes, so now the Muslims all did the same thing, basically. But, you know, you need taxes in a society. It's how things get done. Woo, it's hot here. I bet it was in those times too. All right. So certain jobs were outlawed for anybody but Muslims, like being in justice and someone's lighting fireworks in the day. All right, serving in the law like a judge and also the military was for Muslim people only, but everything else was open to Christians, Jewish.
I heard they are guns. They shoot them off at weddings and stuff.
You couldn't be in the military, but you could be involved in banking, food processing, clothing production, and more. The mixed island had an Arab, Hebrew-speaking Jewish population, and many different types of Christians, Greeks, Latins, all kinds of things were going on. Oh, schools and dogs.
He's on a mission.
Bye.
Ciao.
Alright, so the capital of Palermo in the Islamic times had a height of 500,000 people. One of the largest cities in the world. An estimate in 1050 had about 500,000 people, 350 to 500,000 people population. It was the third highest population of anywhere in Europe. Number one being Constantinople with 600,000, and Cordoba in Spain, which was also a Muslim place, with 450,000. So Palermo in the year 1000 was the third largest city in Europe, population-wise. The Arabs built an underground water supply system that still is in use, kind of. It was upgraded a little bit, but it was called the Kanat. That was an ancient waterway that has groundwater that's still used. So lots of things, science and mathematics were refined on the island. Astronomy, looking at the stars and the planets and the moon, was very advanced in this society. Schools were open all over Palermo. Children were going to school. A lot of places, other places in Europe, hardly anybody could read, man. So it was so much different. Astronomy, for example, was so important in people's everyday lives that barbers, ooh, I need a haircut right now. Barbers often would have a sextant, which was something you pointed up at the stars in the sky. They would have this device for the position of the stars and the planets to tell them if they should cut someone's hair or beard or not. Oh, sorry, Venus is in this area. I can't cut your hair today. It was very strange. Well, interesting. This is huge. All right, so a lot of the Sicilian foods that we all love today and that are big time on the island to this day and became worldwide, like several citruses, lemons, oranges, all kinds of different fruits, several pastries. It's just like the call to prayer. Up on a minaret 5 times a day, Muslim tradition. Allah Akbar, something like that with a bunch, no offense. I don't know the whole call to prayer, but it's beautiful and it looks very similar to that. And the church bell is actually a very similar thing. Kind of like a time-telling device at the same time. All right, the bell got me off track here. I'm talking about citrus. Okay, so it's a bunch of citruses, foods, and other things that we love to this day. Cured meats, salty meats were expertise here in Muslim Sicily. Cheeses, different rounded cheeses that are super popular now. Local foods have a little like couscous and what was that other one we tried the other day? I forget. Anyways, a lot of these foods were perfected that are still enjoyed in the world today, like citrus farming, cured meats, and other things, pastries that are still enjoyed in Sicily today during the Muslim times of Balharam. So local Arab men would have strict social clubs and a way of dress. They especially met on Fridays, the holy day in Islam. They had elaborate outfits, dyed beards, shaved armpits, jewelry, tons of gold jewelry, and even eye makeup. And they had this long hair, and they had these big robes. The Arab men of Palermo must have been really interesting to see. What they did was they had, like I said, slaves were the #1 business in Arabic Palermo of all races. All right, it's not a racial thing how slavery was then, but these high-class Arabic men would have slaves stand around on the corners with mirrors so that they could look at themselves in their elaborate outfits as they walked the streets. I can just see them, man, walking around here with flowing robes, thinking they're so cool. Oh man, it must have been quite a sight. Just to time travel and see something like that. Must have been hot too. They must have had flowy clothes like they do in Arabia. At the site of an Islamic old graveyard and potential mosque, let's move on to the next site. Finish the fascinating story of Balharam, capital of the Emiratun Sicilian, Emirate of Sicily. A very fascinating place. Inspiration of this very North African design on this church. So the Muslims from the north of Africa, in modern day Tunisia, during the conquest of Sicily, they constantly had reinforcements coming in. So it was a long battle. The Byzantines fought off hard. A lot of people accepted their incoming. A lot of people fled, but after 80 years, they took the entire island. Why does it do this?
I don't know. Don't close this. I don't want you.
Let's keep this going. The Red Domes. All right, so the Aghlabids, their home base was in Tunisia area, and they kind of grew into a lot of Algeria and what became Libya. And they came down here to Sicily raiding at first. They had a jihad. So this renegade group of locals, hey! This renegade group of local Sicilians, Christians, was mad at the leadership and emperor in Constantinople, so they sided with this group. They landed with 70 ships and established a city on the port of Sicily, the first Islamic city on Sicily, kind of far from here, more in the east. And after initially they tried to take the ancient city of Syracuse, that failed because of their walled defenses. So 4 years after landing, they then captured Palermo. So after the Muslims, after failing to capture Syracuse, came over here to western Sicily and took the city of Panormus. Naming it Balharam. I like that. So this started several hundred years of Islamic Sicily. Man, I'm outside. There's nobody else around me. If there's someone else around me.
I need to put it on. She was looking outside.
Alright, so there was a year-long siege to take Palermo. But after they took it, they made it the capital of their province of the Aghlabid Empire, Emirate, called Ifriqiya. Oh man, I'm butchering these Arabic names. Ifriqiya. It kind of sounds like Africa. They're North African based in Tunisia, so Sicily and Palermo became part of that caliphate from 831 to 909. And then it became a part of something, the Fatimid Caliphate, 909 to 948 AD. In 948 AD, though, the Emirate of Sicily became independent. Had its own sultan. And it was an independent entity outside of control from any other caliphate. So the whole island ended up being dominated by Islam. And at first they were like, should we go crazy like we do in most places and make everyone convert or die to Islam? But they actually decided not to do that. So they allowed the Hebrew and Greek, Christian and Catholic and Byzantine people that were already here kind of to be absorbed and coexist, intermingle into their new place that they had going on. So in 948 AD, it became autonomous, the emirate under a family called the Kalbids. And in 1044 AD, there was various emirates in war, but this was a long period of Islamic domination, which you can see the influences of this place. This was actually a graveyard and a site of a mosque. It's thought, I don't know, the history is a little bit confusing. I feel like they whitewash and Christianize history a little bit to make it not as Muslim just because it makes people feel better. But there's no doubt about it. Muslims came into Sicily starting in the 600s. They pretty much took over the whole thing in the 800s and ruled it from the capital here, Palermo, Bahram. And the place was called, when I go inside, I'll put it on. The place was called Balharam, and the name of it was Emiratum Sicilatun, the Emirate of Sicily. Emiratum Sicilatun is how you say it in Arabic. Fascinating stuff. So this was the site of a graveyard, like I said. And let's go back and talk about the history of the invasion. So there was little resistance as the Muslims marched along into the island. Because there was a big unpopularity from the Sicilian locals about the Byzantine leadership. Just like what happens in several places, you know, an invading army comes in, you're mad at your faraway capital. Hey, come on in, save us, free us from our oppressors. Something's over there?
No, I was asking him for...
Oh, okay. So, you know, some of the Christians and Jewish were scared because it was jihad, you know, and this kind of thing didn't go good for people that weren't Muslim usually, so some people fled, but a lot of people stayed. So there was little resistance. It took about 70 to 80 years total, but the Arabs, North Africans, completely took over the whole island of Sicily in 902 AD. Even with some incursions into southern mainland Italy. A lot of people don't know that either. Parts of southern Italy were captured by Muslims from the faltering Byzantines at the time. They had all kinds of problems, man. There was the Byzantines had a huge war against the Zoroastrian Persian Empire that weakened them a ton. They had a horrible time recapturing Italy from the Lombards. That was just a terrible disaster, even though they succeeded. And also there was, speaking of 2020, there was a huge plague that ravaged the Byzantine Empire in the 600s, 700s. they lost Jerusalem and they had to fight to take it back, and all kinds of stuff was going on. So, the Byzantines. So this weakened Byzantine Sicily, which allowed this incoming thing to happen in the 900s. I just talked about some people fled, like the Bishop of Palermo, in fear of losing his life and power. He fled to the mountains of Monreale. And although the Christians were allowed to stay in the city of Palermo, he still fled up there, and that's where the Cathedral of Monreale was later built by the Normans. But Christians were allowed to worship and still exist in the city, even though at first it was kind of a freak out thing, which is understandable. Okay, hit the button. Okay, so we're in modern Palermo. Massive churches were built, and later on in the history we're going to talk about there was a Jewish bathhouse in this neighborhood somewhere buried underneath these buildings that's still there, but I can't find it. That's all right. Let's keep on talking about the story. So, it was a thriving society, the Emirate of Sicily. And although one of the leading businesses was slavery, so there was a big-time slave market in all over Sicily, but all over Palermo. So there was this one area, it's gone now, but it was a two-tiered, it was people of all races, by the way, all religions. But during the Emirate of Sicily time, one of their biggest businesses was slavery. So there was this huge slave market, massive building, where they had two levels. The highest level was, artisans, cooks, people that could do really high-skilled labor. They're a little bit more expensive, and the lower level of slaves were just like laborers. But, we think of slavery, you think of it in the modern sense, man. Everywhere really had it, and so did Palermo, and it wasn't as, brutal as a lot of other places and times in history. Still, we have to talk about it. It's not like I'm going to keep it quiet. It was not the slave markets in Palermo was not racially or religious exclusive. It just what is what it was. Women, children. I'm not swiping it under the rug, man. During the Emirate of Sicily times, their main business was slavery. True. All right. The majority of the slaves, like the majority of the people, were actually Muslim. We're talking 1,300 years ago, also. Everybody. I love talking about controversial stuff in my videos, but you're walking by, people can understand English sometimes. No, I don't want to offend anybody, man. Come on. I'm just making a video here. All right. It would be really fascinating, though, to understand the origins and DNA of the Palermo slave populations of the past. Who knows where they came from? Probably from all over the world, which is really interesting. We talked about the slave house. Bodyguards. So the top tier of slaves were were also cooks and bodyguards. So that was important for safety. The slave owners were almost exclusively the high class Muslim men in this time. So another rough thing is often the slaves became eunuchs, which is a man or a boy that is castrated. And the reason they did this was often slave eunuchs had to look after the harem, which was different in Sicily. It wasn't a debauched place of orgy houses like some places in history, like in the Ottoman Empire. But the harem was actually a place in Palermo. The harem was a sanctuary. The word actually means derives from sanctuary in Arabic. So it was just a hangout for women, and the eunuchs, the castrated male slaves, work in the harem, and they were eunuchs because that's where all the women were hanging out, and they didn't want any problems with that kind of stuff. True story. All right, so all the slaves didn't have a bad time in the Emirate of Sicily times, though. Some were treated pretty decently. Some even were freed at the time of the death of their owner so that they could get into heaven. The slave owners were adherent Muslims, and they thought if they freed their slaves when they died, they would be brought into heaven with Allah. And sometimes their slaves were even given inheritance when they died. How groundbreaking is that? What do you think about that? All right, so of these years, 827 to 1072 AD was a time of complete Muslim sovereignty. But near the end, the leadership started fracturing, different vying of power to be sultan and be power, really weakened them. And let's talk about that some more. All right. Energized just had an espresso outdoor market like this that still exists now. Thrived in the times of the Emirates time. So it's exactly almost the same as it used to have it. Right around this neighborhood, thousands of years ago, 1,300 years ago or so. Muslim, Christian, Greek, Catholic, and Jewish people all intermingled together in these outdoor markets. It was really fascinating. It would have been very interesting to take a time machine and go see that. And it's still part of the culture today. Look, they're doing the same kind of thing. So those were the times of the year 827 to 1072. But in the 1000s AD, the different warlords were vying for power, and it splintered up the sultan and the leadership, and divide and conquer, the same old thing. As soon as a place gets divided, it's easier for it to fall apart. A people called the Normans would step onto the scene next. They were descendants of a mix of northern French and Vikings from Norway. They went to all kinds of crazy areas, including southern Italy, and then came down here. So a Norman family would end up ousting the Muslim leadership and taking over, starting the kingdom of Sicily. But they allowed the existing infrastructure and culture and people actually to pretty much exist as it had been, which was really cool of them to do. So, they promoted freedom of religion mostly. They wanted more people to be Christian. Obviously, they were Catholic, but they started building a bunch of grand churches. Like that one looks really old. It has the archways, kind of the Muslim style. They have a speaker on top too, kind of like this call to prayer. Who knows? The Muslim culture in Palermo existed all the way till the 1200s. A European contemporary was Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus at this time. So they were in connection, which is an entirely different and fascinating story that most people don't know about. The Muslim times had a lasting effect on Sicily and Palermo in many, many ways, from architecture to food to its DNA. But most notably was the importance of family bonds that was harvested in this day during the Emirate of Sicily times. That is evident to this day. Italian families are real tight-knit, and Sicilian especially. Sicilian families, real tight-knit. Your cousins, your uncle, your grandparents. That, a lot of people think, comes from the Muslim era, that way of doing things. The Grand Mosque of Palermo was converted to Palermo Cathedral, which we'll go to in a second, as well as some other mosques that were converted to churches. But surprisingly, not much remains from those times that was reincorporated into future buildings, because the city was not sacked and destroyed. Neighborhoods like the Khalsa, where Muslim officials were elected, the slave market and quarters were, and more were repurposed and are still vibrant parts of the city. Okay, so this sign was put up recently, but it harks to its past, Palermo's past. It's in Italian, Hebrew, and Arabic. This site isn't exactly historically correct. Well, one, they spoke Latin and Greek a lot of times before Italian was invented. And the Hebrew is actually not what they spoke here. A lot of Jewish people, they spoke something called Arabo Hebrew. And also I read somewhere that the Hebrew writing is not translated correctly and it's pretty much gibberish. But the Arabic actually says that. Okay, you have a question?
Was there in the church we got into, everything was in Greek?
Yes,
all the
there were lots of
paintings.
Greek speakers here also, so maybe this sign should be updated to be more historically accurate, but people might not know that. It represents the three major faiths of Palermo at the time we're talking about. Okay, so this area actually over here was the Jewish quarter in the majority Muslim city. And, we're going to talk about that in a second. But let's talk about the mixture of people real quick. I spoke these three languages in three separate Abrahamic faiths. So they actually were all intermingling, at the markets, and it wasn't exactly perfect, like a lot of people glorify. There was obviously, we're talking about the medieval times, Middle Ages. So, there was some culture clashes here and there. Sometimes between Catholics, Christians, Jewish and Muslim people, and of course Muslims were the leadership, so they were able to get certain jobs that other people couldn't. But all in all, it was real intermingling. It was really interesting. So okay, some stories about this intermingling time. Cool church right there. This is the central modern Palermo. Postcards for sale, made in Palermo. All right, so there's some interesting stories of this time where these three languages were being. So the people weren't exactly orthodox, a lot of them, for their different religions. Like there were some stories of scandalous as this is. There was stories of 1,300 years ago, Muslim women and Catholic nuns getting together and drinking wine. So both of them weren't supposed to be drinking, but they had these like little underground enotecas where nuns and Muslim women would drink wine together in like the year 800. It's pretty crazy. They obviously weren't supposed to be doing that. And there's this other story about a man from North Africa. He was visiting the coast over here, not too far away, and let's move over here. Alright, so he was visiting Palermo and he was shocked. He was real orthodox Muslim, followed all the rules, and he couldn't believe that there was all these people intermingling with each other. He was a very strict Muslim man, and he wrote about it, I think from the year maybe 900, something like that. He was appalled by the non-orthodox practices of the locals, exclaiming that they were barbarity of the interfaith marriages. So sometimes the different religions would marry each other, and then usually the woman would convert to the other religion. Look, right there. People are getting along with opposite views. Vero amore. I think that's a police officer and a protester. Very 2020. And also he talked about the banditry. So this was a problem all throughout Palermo history. Thieves and bandits. So a lot of the Muslim youth were really bandits on the coast and stuff, and it was really kind of intense. But some other interesting stories include elaborate dress. Arabic men would be seen walking the streets here.
La tecnologia che c'è oggi, si può fare pure un po',
Right. Ooh, look, there's another sign. Italian, Hebrew, and Arabic. Okay, so this actually area was a Jewish neighborhood. So there was like somewhere around here, there's a Jewish bank. Here, it might be over there. Elaborate church, cool archways. Definitely not over there. Anyways, there were several stories, like the elaborate dress, back to the elaborate dress Muslim men of Islamic Palermo. So they had all these colors and jewelry and cool stuff going on, man. All these people were walking the streets all together right in this area. This plaza is actually the Jewish neighborhood. I mentioned that already. So the Arab men were very gentlemanly during the day, and their behavior often changed at night. We're talking about 1,300 years ago, so I'm not talking about any modern people here. But this happened right on this spot. So there was some seedy behavior at nighttime, which we talked about was very unorthodox. We talked about, you know, it was more of a relaxed atmosphere, Palermo. It wasn't so strict as a lot of religious places at the time, which is unheard of in the Middle Ages, right? You had people getting tortured and executed for all kinds of religious infractions. So it was kind of an easygoing place here in Palermo. It's pretty cool. More kind of how most of the world is, not all, but most of the world is now, which I appreciate. I think that's great. Let people live, man. You know, it's sad what happens to a lot of people where they're forced into sad situations because of their culture or whatever. It happens everywhere, all throughout history. Anyway, okay. So, the guy was listening. All right, so something real seedy used to happen. These well-behaved Arab elites of Palermo, they would go to these seedy nightclubs at night, pretty much strip clubs. They were dancing clubs where they would have girls from India that were, strippers basically. And they were like underground clubs, and Jewish and Christian smugglers would smuggle in alcohol for these places. So they would drink at night, and it sounds really interesting. Yeah, hey, humans will be human after all. Unfortunately, a lot of the girls from India were probably slaves. Maybe not. But Muslim men, other than that, would spend their time watching cockfights, playing chess, and game hunting. There were converts too to Islam for marriage proposals and other purposes. Christians, Catholics, Jewish, especially women that were marrying men, they would convert to Islam. The city was majority Muslim of many, many different backgrounds from North Africa, Arabs, likely more for several centuries, and it was ruled by a sultan. Right in this spot, this went down. So let's talk about the Jewish history next. Let's find somewhere else. All right, so let's keep going with this story. As you can see, very Catholic place now. Churches were built, and later on in the history we're going to talk about, but we're still in the Emirate times where horses like that were likely going down the streets that are now kind of tourist things. Okay, so around here there was a Jewish bathhouse. It's buried somewhere. It's sometimes accessible. I can't find it. Okay, more signs, all 3 languages. This area around here actually was the Jewish quarter. And this is Palermo's only synagogue. The first one in 500 years. We'll explain that in a second. It was a Catholic church turned into a synagogue. Over here in the cuts, there's that Star of David. It says synagogue there, so there's proof.
No, it says no synagogue.
Oh, well, it was a synagogue. Alright, so the importance of this, though, is the history. Right here, somewhere, probably some buried beneath these more modern buildings, was the great synagogue of Palermo. So it was probably a pretty cool looking building at some point right around this area. That's why they knew our Jewish community was like, we want a new synagogue in this area. So there have been Jews on the island of Sicily for 15 centuries. Around 100 BC, they think, was the first Jewish people to move to Palermo, Sicily. That's insane. Probably the oldest Jewish community in Europe, they think. Wow, look at this, man. Talking history, crazy stuff like that. I love it. Okay, so come on. Jewish people, though, were sadly banished in 1492 by the Spanish Inquisition. But we're not talking about that time. The Emirate times, Muslim Sicily, the Jewish community flourished, especially around here, and they intermingled with the Muslims and Christians alike. Sicily, though, was majority Muslim, like we talked about. And the multi-faith island didn't quite have the most orthodox practicing religious people, however, which was very strange for the time. Oh, see, this tour guy knows. Okay, let's go.
Am I supposed to cut?
Majority Muslim Palermo. They were experts, craftsmanship and art, all kinds of things. Math, geometry, food processing, all kinds of stuff. Also the Jewish population. This looks very Arabic right here. The way that fountain's set up like that. And the Jewish people here spoke Arabic in Palermo, of kind of combination of styles of Hebrew and Arabic put together, which is really interesting. Everyone kind of commingled all together, man, for a while there until 1200s. It's kind of cool. It's a disservice to children, man, and they don't teach, in America especially, that they don't go too in depth about racism, slavery, and it leaves out a lot of stuff in the world. I get it, time, and with children, you don't want to get too crazy. A lot of violence and terrible stuff happens, but I had to research all this stuff on my own, man, recently. Like, who knows out there, what percentage of people that Palermo and Sicily is Muslim place for a long time, and Spain for that matter. It just causes more problems how a lot of these things are left out in Western education. They don't teach you about it. They learn all about Christianity and all that stuff. I think it's a disservice to children, because then they grow up biased or whatever. I don't like it, man. All right, so let's keep going with this story. As you can see, very Catholic place now. Churches were built, and later on in the history we're going to talk about, but we're still in the emirate times where horses like that were likely going down the streets that are now kind of tourist things. Okay, so around here there was a Jewish bathhouse. It's buried somewhere. It's sometimes accessible. I can't find it. Al-Aziz, the splendid one, Zisa Palace. Just like I thought, this was engineered, orchestrated the building for the Normans, but by Muslim workers and people, because they, not the Normans, knew how to do geometric designs and engineering. And that cathedral we went to yesterday was actually also built by Muslim artisans of Palermo, which was a place where all kinds of people coexisted. Phoenicians, which are Lebanese, Carthaginians, modern day Tunisians, Latins, Byzantines, those were Christians, Hebrews, Jewish people, Muslims from North Africa and Arabia. Cool, man. Cool, this is a gravestone of a mother of a priest, so Christian priest, but in 1148 it was written in the 4 languages of Palermo, which was Arabic, Hebrew, there's a lot of Jewish people here, and Greek and Latin on both sides there. Very fascinating. 4 languages.
It does not say that.
Very diverse.
It does only say it in Italian and English.
Oh, it says it in Italian only now, so we
English
can't.
right here, the
Nice information. So the top here is actually Judeo-Arabic, which looks like to me some kind of mix of Hebrew and Arabic. And yes, that is true. The Jewish population of Palermo, which was here for many centuries, probably longer than that, spoke Arabic. They were the they were the last Arabic-speaking non-Muslims anywhere in the world, I think, of Palermo. Very interesting, that language. Look at these inscriptions. That one's Greek, Latin, regular Arabic on the bottom there. For a Christian person, this plane's been flying around all day. It's kind of weird. And this is something cool. This is an ancient street network of Giovanni.
There is a trash can right here.
Someone littered?
Right here. There's a trash can right here.
That's terrible. All right, this isn't quite what I thought, but
No, I can't pick it up because of COVID.
this is a call center. Okay.
That was right here.
All right. So a lot of Arabs and Muslims fled as the Normans came in, but actually they harbored a harmonious society because the brute Northern European Normans who came in here noticed that the culture that was here, mathematics, science, architecture, engineering, was beyond anything they could understand. So they let artisans and scientists and different people of all religions thrive in the newly conquered Palermo, including the Arabic locals that built this. So, the Normans were smart. Instead of wiping out the whole place and destroying everything, they let it flourish more into a golden age of synchronicity of different peoples, of different beliefs, all kinds of places they were from. Byzantines, Greeks, Jewish people, probably of all different races, Arabic people, Muslim people of a bunch of different races, probably Christians, all coexisted together here nearly 1,000 years ago, around 1,000 years ago. It's crazy filming. And Muslim artisans and architects were especially experts at the geometric shapes, like these on the floors and on the ceiling. But they also were inspired by ancient designs from the Romans and Greek times, like the Corinthian columns here. They're also inspired, this artwork especially, by Byzantium, Eastern Roman Empire, which is kind of pretty close by, right? The artwork looks very much like Eastern Orthodox churches that you find now in Russia, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, places like that. Very similar. They have all the saints up like that. And, it's beautiful, beautiful. Gold-plated, incredible, awesome.
Oh.
All right, so we're at the Grand Mosque, Cathedral of Palermo, but there's a few small little hints of its old past, like that right there, which is likely was on a pillar that was part of the Grand Mosque. That could have been a pillar from an earlier Roman building because of the marble and Corinthian column. That's an Arabic inscription there, which says, dun, 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 dun. All right, the Arabic inscription on the left column outside the, I could have read that to find it. I was searching all over for it and I wrote it down. What it says is, it's preserved from the Grand Mosque that once stood here. The passage is from the Quran. And it's only on my phone. The notes for it. Great. Maybe you could zoom in on it?
Check the comments.
Pretty cool. All right, one thing I forgot to mention was this grand cathedral. Look at this thing, man. It's freaking amazing. Before it was a mosque, it actually was a church. A Byzantine basilica church. Smaller in scale. So that church was built upon earlier buildings that were Roman and Carthaginian, and the mosque existed here for about 400 years or so. Less than that, actually. 3 layers of history are involved in this cathedral. That's what it is. So 1185 has been in its current state. You actually see a little bit of World War II damage on the archways here, which is kind of rough. And I'm fairly sure this part right here was the minaret part of the Grand Mosque that was converted. So a lot of this geometric design and arches are all Islamic. You know, interesting and often probably overlooked because it's a Catholic cathedral. But really it's a mix of all kinds of things, man. It's interesting to get into the heads of the people that were creating buildings like 1,000 years ago, so you don't know exactly what means what and who put what where and the secret symbolism maybe they were thinking of when they put things in certain areas. For example, a lot of Catholic stuff has not secret, but Roman, even pagan symbolism ingrained into it that a lot of people don't realize. And this place definitely, look at this, man, above my head, awesome. This place is definitely fascinating. Really cool.
I'm filming.
It's not a good time to film. And something called the Khalsa, not much of it left. This was around 1,200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. The slave market of Islamic Palermo, where there were 2 levels of slaves. The higher levels were more expensive, bodyguards and cooks and stuff like that, artisans. The lower levels were...
So I'm a higher level?
Yeah, I guess so. You're a cook. Probably the higher level were also, sex workers, stuff like that.
I'm not supposed to be on that level.
Who knows, man? I don't know. They were supposed to be Islamic, not so bad, but they had slaves. Also, it was an area where elections were held. Can't talk. Doing so much history today. This was super weird. So over here is some area that's blocked off. There's the date, 1191 AD. So this neighborhood is called the Khalsa, which, maybe I could get that weird looking plane that's been flying around for the bike race. Here it comes. No? Okay. Anyways, this neighborhood was specifically important in the Islamic times. They had leadership, votes here, I guess you could call it. They also had a massive slave market here and the slave quarters. So this neighborhood, the Khalsa, really is shaped just very similar to how it was in those days. Now it's still a part of the neighborhood. You heard some singing or something?
Somebody's ringtone that. You know that one?
The Khalsa. Really cool too. 1182, I think it said it was built. It has the 3 domes on the top. Very, very Islamic looking, those domes. Remember, when this was built, the city of Palermo was 80% Muslim population in the 1100s. Crazy to think about, right? But true. And here we go. Let's go to the next spot. The red domes up there are really cool. So they're probably like built by Muslim hands, and also built to Arabic people and Muslim people walking around Palermo. They look at familiar looking architecture, not something totally alien. They might be a little bit more comfortable. That's my theory on why this was built like that. So it's a church though. All right, so this is a Norman Arabic inspired collaboration from 1191, another church. But let's talk about what we were just talking about, because this neighborhood here is important. It's called the Khalsa, still named that to this day. And it's the area that I was just talking about where several things happen in Arabic. Well, let's not call it Arabic, Muslim. They were Muslim Palermo. They weren't exactly Arabic, the people. Some of them were, but there were several mosques around here, and Muslim officials were elected in this neighborhood. They had some area where there was an election taking place. Now let's walk around the neighborhood. This is very old, but sadly nothing from Islamic Khalsa, I think, remains. It's all kind of buried away here. This park looks kind of old. Alright, so there was a place where, 99 degrees right now, Fahrenheit. It's really hot. I should have went swimming today. Decided to do some history filming. Yeah, this looks really old right here. This is really cool. Alright, so the Khalsa was important to their times, and other than...
Ray, watch your head!
flat.
I'm
Very strange.
I'm stopping.
All right, so this is the remains of the Khalsa. This is interesting. So this was a Muslim foundations to a neighborhood. Later on, a house in the 1900s. I think the sign said, but this was like a super important area of Islamic Bahram, city of Palermo. And what was here was a lecture area. Whoa, can you hear me? Whoa, look at the plane again. Ciao! The large slave market and their slave quarters was on this location that I talked about, where they had the several levels of the slaves, the higher level and the lower level. That was right around here, so that's kind of a rough history standing on the place where that happened. But the Khalsa and more were repurposed and are still used areas of the city. So this was a very important neighborhood. It's large, actually. The whole surrounding area, part of the Arabic Stadium. This is all that's left. These probably built upon something earlier, actually. That's pretty crazy. Okay. Oh, look at that. Some Sicilian people today, because of this multicultural path. There's a helicopter! I hope you can hear me! These helicopters are going crazy! Because of the close by connection, many Muslim people have moved here again. And many modern Sicilians, because of this ancient time, have often a little bit darker skin, sometimes curly hair, more Arab or different features than different Italians. You know, it's not just noticeable sometimes. And I think it's because of this past of Arabic history and all this multiculturalism, and I think it's a beautiful thing, man. It's really cool, unique, and I feel like they should embrace it. So let's go inside the cathedral and see if we can find anything. And yeah, the Arab features can still be seen in many modern Sicilians, including many other genetic features like redheads, maybe that came from the Normans. And I think it's beautiful. So a Sicilian Arab poet, Ibn Habnis, that lived in the year 1056 to 1133, wrote, as the Normans advanced and he fled. As the wolves run through the forests, so do the invaders demolish what they find on our island. Oh, sea, why do you separate me from my homeland? If I could only sail back to my beloved Sicily. So a lot of Muslims fled when the Normans came, but you know, the Arab era existed a little bit longer until about the 1250s. Ciao!